As MMA fans, we're always on the lookout for prospects, and some of them turn out to be frauds, like Payne Talbot, who lost to Rayoni Barcelos. For those of you who don't know, that man is damn near 40, but at the end of the day, he still is a vet, and he shouldn't be overlooked. And then you have Austin Bashi, who was undefeated going into his fight against Christian Rodriguez and got dominated for 3 rounds. He kept on chain wrestling, but wasn't really doing enough to steal a round. And people forget that Christian Rodriguez is known to beat prospects, undefeated prospects to be exact. He's the same guy that beat Raul Rosas Jr. And Raul bounced back from that loss. So we shouldn't really look at these losses like, oh, these guys are frauds. Nah, it's just a lesson that they needed to learn. And maybe they took some notes down and they improved in certain aspects where they were weak. For Payne Talbot, that would be his grappling. For Austin Bashi, I think that would be his activity, because the guy can wrestle, no doubt. He is a better wrestler than Christian Rodriguez. Christian was just defending, but he couldn't really offensively wrestle Austin Bashi. But on the feet, Christian had the reach and height advantage and just the better striking in general, so he won the fight for that reason. And then you have fighters that graduated from prospects to top 15. Guys like Carlos Prates, who's on a tear right now. He just knocked out Neil Magny in a dominant fashion, and he's now ranked number 13 in the welterweight division. I think he'll be very good up until he faces a grappler. That's when I think he's going to lose and upset a lot of the MMA community, and they're going to say stuff like, oh, grapplers are boring, all they do is control guys on the cage. Whether you like it or not, that's working for them, so it's up to Carlos Prates to develop a style that counters that. And I think he's trying his best to do so, because from the very few times that we did see him defensively grapple, he did pretty well, and even DC acknowledged that. And then you have JDM, who might just fight for the title soon. That is if he beats Leon Edwards. So I'm hoping Jacobe Smith can be just as promising. And you would think he is, coming in as an undefeated 10-0 fighter. But when you look at a lot of his wins, you start to question the legitimacy of his skill. A lot of the guys he fought have losing records, like Zach Kelly, who was 9-24. For someone to be 9-24, it must mean that they don't train at all and they're probably getting paid to fight. And then you have William Florentino, who was 5-6, which isn't too bad, but still bad, and it's not a win you could boast about. And lastly, you have Tommy Britton, who was 5-9. And I watched that fight myself, and Tommy Britton looked like he had no business being in there. The guy was so long, yet his stance was so low, and understandably so. I guess he was trying to defend the takedowns. But still, man, I just feel like he did a terrible job. And he complained at the ref for stopping the fight when he was literally getting pieced up left, right, and center. I mean, I gotta give it to him. Jacobe Smith has some really good ground and pound, and he used this to beat Christian Savoy in his Dana White Contender Series fight via second round TKO. And that was pretty impressive, because Christian Savoy's record is 10-1-1, and I don't know if he's fighting the highest of competition, but his record is pretty decent, and for someone at Jacobe Smith's level, that's a fight you should be taking. And just when I thought he was just a glorified striker, he turned out to be a pretty decent one in his fight against Preston Parsons, where he knocked him out in the first round with the right hand left hook combination that left Preston starched. In his fights before that, he was relying on pure explosiveness and Black Air Force One energy, but now I think his technique has improved. He has good form, good distance management. He makes use of his power a lot more efficiently. Before, he would throw a lot of winded punches. And I know he was knocking guys out in round 1, but those were taxi drivers, guys, so I don't know how impressive those wins are. And I do think he can beat some of the top 15 guys. I think he would beat Kobe, Jeff Neal, Stephen Thompson, and Gilbert Burns. His current version, yes, I do think he stands a chance, but when he actually does start fighting top 15 fighters, I think he will 100% beat those guys. Not only because they're old, I just think the game is advancing. And these young cats, they know how to defend wrestling, they know how to wrestle offensively. Even guys that are seen as strikers are learning how to fight wrestlers. Look at Ian Gary. Shavkat may not be the best at takedowns, but he does have a really good grappling pedigree. He comes from a combat sambo background, hence him not being able to get takedowns that well. But he is able to control his opponents on the cage and submit them, hence his 100% finish rate before he fought Ian Gary. And Ian Gary still fought very well. He managed to survive up until the 4th round, and then Shavkat ended up taking him down. So I think this guy, Jacobe Smith, who actually comes from a wrestling background, he should pair up well against the so-called good grapplers in the top 15. And a lot of them are getting old, so I think that just makes it a lot easier for Kobe, who has pretty decent genetics. And when I say decent, I mean really good genetics. I mean, he has one of the best physiques in the top 15. That is when he does eventually make it there, of course. I think Jacobe will do very well against strikers and only strikers. But for grapplers, I'm not very sure. We just haven't seen him fight a grappler yet. I'm not going to start glazing him until that actually happens, because remember Umar Nurmagomedov? People were glazing the guy, thinking he was going to beat Merab. And I was one of the few that didn't. I even made a video about it before the fight saying, who the heck has Umar beat for us to be glazing him? For us to be saying he's better than the cardio king, Merab Dvalishvili. And we saw what happened there. Merab was the stronger opponent. He had the better cardio. Some people say Umar is more skilled than Merab, which I do agree. But in terms of strength, Merab is stronger than Umar. And I think for guys like Jacobe Smith, until we actually see him fight good grapplers, we just don't know how well he'll pair up against them. But as for strikers like Carlos Prates and Michael Page, I think Jacobe is a nightmare matchup for those guys. In fact, I think he would beat both of them on the same night, literally. Look at Carlos Prates, for instance. He's susceptible to getting hit. Look at his fights against Trevin Giles, or Trevin Giles, however you pronounce his surname. I think Trevin was landing some pretty decent strikes on him, but with Carlos Prates, he's a knockout artist, so he will eventually knock you out. For Jacobe Smith, all he would have to do is just be defensively sound to a point where he can actually take down Carlos Prates, which he would manage to do. Carlos comes from a Muay Thai background, so I don't think he'll have an easy time defending someone like Jacobe Smith's takedowns. And Jacobe is a lot stronger than Carlos Prates. Carlos Prates' build is good for striking, but for wrestling, Jacobe has the upper hand. So I would love to see how that fight would play out. And I wonder how he'll do against higher level competition like Kamaru Usman, Shavkat, Ian Gary, and Buckley. But for now, we just don't know. And I want you guys to let me know what you think about him in the comments. Like and subscribe. Thanks.